Hello and welcome to the Fenland Chatter. I'm producer Dave and I'm supported with Amanda Carlin.
Hello, producer Dave.
Hello, how are you today?
Very good, thank you.
That's good to hear.
Yes, are you well?
I am very well.
Good.
Got some sleep, not as long as I want, but still, so I'm feeling good today.
Oh, that's good news.
Yeah, we're having a few teething problems today with technology. It's always good when the Wi-Fi and the internet goes down, which has been a bit of a pain this morning. So we're having to resort to Plan B. So things may sound slightly different, but we're not going to be stopped. We will carry on.
I thought producer Dave were on Plan Z.
It's probably not far off, actually.
Yeah.
Anything to report from your end? Anything exciting?
There is one exciting thing, I think. A sunflower challenge has been started in Wimbledon.
Oh, good.
Yes, where a family have kindly left out 3 sunflower seeds that have been potted up. And people can go and collect the sunflowers and see who grows the tallest one. That's nice, isn't it?
That's good. What do they win?
It's a free challenge. Yeah.
They win a free bag of sunflowers for next year.
Yeah.
It's good, isn't it? It's always good that little things like these happen, and you say that the normal events anyway. So it's nice to see that some levels of normality are carrying on.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, my bit was just clap for carers last night. It was good to see everybody out. Had a few more people out in the street, so that was excellent.
Good. Yes.
So it's nice to see it's well attended.
Yeah, it seemed louder last night.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it seems to be. There's a lot more banging and a lot more. It was fireworks that was last week, but this week it was more sort of sirens and car horns and things this time.
Oh, lovely.
So keeping it different. So what we got today? Well, we've had the news that we've got 3 more weeks of lockdown.
Yes.
So that's official. So that's because we were waiting for it to be confirmed, and that's now been given the the go ahead. That's basically that's now what we're dealing with for the next 3 weeks. But we thought that we would go through the rules and regulations that go along with the quarantine.
Mm.
It has been issued in the Eastern Daily Press and the Cams Times and probably a few other publications as well. But we thought we'd actually go through and look at what's actually being stated and just have a bit of a discussion as well, or maybe just clarify some of the rules, because there's a couple that are maybe a little bit more ambiguous. But it's good to see that they are actually putting stuff out in a handy form. I mean, what I'll do is I'll put this as a PDF, as an attachment, so there's no adverts and glossy pictures in it as well. So it's just basically a direct cut. So
yeah, that's a good idea.
We can put that on the Facebook page as well if anybody wants to download it or have a look at it.
Mm.
So according to rules, people are allowed to exercise more than 1 a day. Okay, or drive to a countryside to walk, or more time if more time is spent walking than driving. Moving to a friend's house for several days after an argument at home is considered likely to be reasonable. And lockdown rules for what constitutes a reasonable excuse to leave the place where you live. So those are sort of the topics that are covered by this. So the first one is sort of necessity, and these are likely to be reasonable. So buying several days worth of food, including luxury items and alcohol.
That is necessary.
It probably is. Buying a small amount of staple items or necessities, including newspapers, pet foods, loaf of bread, milk. collecting surplus basic food items for a friend, and buying tools and supplies to repair a fence panel damaged in recent bad weather. So,
yeah, that's fair enough, because you might have pets.
Yes.
They need to be able to go out.
Yeah, that's true. And it was something that was discussed last night. They were talking about, what constitutes the need for fixing DIY repairs, having somebody around for construction work. And it was basically saying that it has to be quality of life that dictates whether someone actually comes round. So, because one woman said that she had a washing machine that didn't work, so she either needed it repaired or replaced. Yeah. And the advice was, well, you've got a sink and you've got some soapy water. Go back to... And it's like, yeah, I can see the point, but how practical is that?
How many people has she got in her family?
Well, that's how big is... Yeah, that's a big issue, is like how many people are there. So
yeah.
I think it's down to... If it's just you, you can probably get away with it. Well, I say you get away with it, but you could manage it. But if it's a large family, then it's then down to how much of an impact it is on the life of the people living in the household. So yeah, that can be an interesting one.
Well, I can empathise. My dishwasher's broken.
Oh dear!
It's the end of the world. It's the absolute end of the world.
You're saying your husband's broken?
Yes, we're buying a lot of fairy liquid now. You just can't call somebody out for that, can you? It's wrong.
It is. It's got to be. I mean, if you've got no water, and it's basic needs and sanitary conditions are sort of the priority. So as long as you've got water and you've got heating, so you can keep washing your hands and maintaining a basic level of hygiene, then that's a sort of the basic level of requirement. But if it's your dishwasher's gone down, then that's not really a requirement for calling somebody out.
It's depressing, I know.
It is, yes. But something that isn't reasonable is obviously buying paints and brushes just to redecorate the kitchen, because it's an unnecessary trip. I mean, if you've got paint and brushes, then there's nothing stopping you doing your own DIY in the house. That's not an issue. It's only when you're having to then contact people unnecessarily, like go to the shops to buy DIY equipment.
And that's interesting. That's really interesting. When we thought we would be included in lockdown, so, from the business perspective, we thought all businesses would be locked down.
Yeah.
And so we went through the Screwfix Direct catalogue, and I had a whole heap of DIY jobs that were going to be done.
Yeah.
And they would have been delivered. So is this information saying you shouldn't order and have those items delivered? I can get that you shouldn't go directly to Screwfix and pick them up. I'm confused over that point.
I think it's not saying that you can't do DIY. It's just basically saying that you can't have somebody come in and do DIY for you, or you physically can't leave the house just to go and buy DIY stuff.
That's fair enough.
But if you've got stuff that's either in the house already, or if you had stuff delivered by courier or delivery for parcel force or whatever, then there's no reason, as long as you're doing it safely and you're adhering to safe guidelines for using the equipment, and you're not putting people in harm or making a nuisance or excessive noise. Because if the last thing people want, I mean, this is something just to bear in mind, is if everybody's in their houses and you start hammering and drilling and banging at unearthly hour in the morning or any time during the day, people's stress levels are fragile at the best of time anyway. So if you start doing excessive DIY, you're going to really upset a lot of people. You're banging, so, take that into consideration. Painting, I don't see a problem as long as the fumes, but that you've got the fume issues, so you've got to make sure that you're not going to drive people out the house because of the fumes from the paint. So there's a lot of issues. You've got to think about the effects, the after effects of what it is that you're doing. I mean, ideally, don't do anything. Don't do any DIY. Or just do any small amounts, but because if you start doing any large projects, if it goes wrong, then how much work is going to be needed to rectify it? If you then you burst a pipe, you then got to call somebody in, so you're then bringing people in. So it's got to be done sensibly. You've got to think about what you're doing and what are the consequences of if it goes wrong. How much impact does that have elsewhere?
So it's not advisable to fit a new shower unit.
No.
All right. Well, that's that out of the window then.
Yeah, I mean, probably painting the door frame or something like that in the sitting room is probably fine. But it's just if you start doing big projects, then I think that's going to cause grievance somewhere. For comments, it's got. There is no need for all persons shopping to be basic food supplies. The purchase of snacks and luxuries is still permitted. So as long as you're not going just for luxury items. You're not just going for Easter eggs or you're just going for beer. As long as you're just doing a normal shop where you include necessities and luxuries in that as well, then that's fine. Yeah. In general terms, a person has a reasonable excuse to visit the shops which remain open to customers under the regulations. So I guess as long as they're open, then you can go to them. And then as long as you adhere 2 meters or the guidelines that are imposed by the shops. I've seen some of the shops now as it's either 2 people in the shop or 1 in, 1 out. Because I went to the bank on Tuesday and I gave up. Because I looked at the line and went, nah. It was halfway down the street because only one person could go in at a time.
This is in Chatteris, isn't it?
No, this is in March.
Really?
And so the queue was then out of from the door and then down the street and across the marketplace.
Wow.
So it may just be in the fact that it was the first day after the bank holiday weekend and lots of people needed to use the bank.
That's amazing.
So I thought, well, I didn't have the time to stand there for, I don't know, a couple of hours or whatever.
No, I'm doing that. If I head to Aldi and I see those queues outside, I turn around. And I might go to Pound Stretcher, so I'm not wasting my journey. I'm being sensible in that respect.
Yeah.
But I feel it would stress me out too much standing in the queue, so I don't do it. I can't do it comfortably for my own well-being, and then that would cause... it would have a domino effect, wouldn't it, on the people around me if I became agitated.
Yeah.
So I tend to go later to Aldi. What I have noticed, when you go later, because there's no queuing and they don't have to manage how many are in the shop, it's more difficult to keep your 2 meters distance when you're inside.
Because people drift around.
Hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that. I was in Jack's on Friday evening, and there was hardly anybody in there. And like you say, people were just drifting around. There was no... People were then oblivious to everybody else because they were then focused back onto their shopping, and they were like, oh, sorry, I'd forgotten I was in my own world, sort of thing.
It's very difficult. The moment you walk outside of your home, it is very difficult to keep the 2 metre distance in. And in addition to that, I don't know about you, David, but I'm starting to forget to wash my hands every 2 hours. I've got it in my head, wash your hands every 2 hours, but I'm not doing it. I've forgotten to do it.
Yes,
I'm having to be strict.
Yeah, it is very easy to fall out of the habit of doing it.
Yeah.
Because everyone becomes complacent again.
Yes. I'm not doing that on purpose. Whilst I'm in the home, I'm forgetting to do it. When I go out, before I go out, I wash my hands. When I come in, I wash my hands.
Yeah.
So that's still happening.
As long as that's the very basic, that's doing anytime you handle anything outside the home, when you get in, and then the first thing to do is wash your hands. So I know it's advisable just to keep doing it every 2 hours anyway, but at least if you're just doing the basics where you're using alcohol-based cleaning as soon as you come into the house. All right, if a person is already out of the address with good reason, then it would not be proportionate to prevent the person from buying non-essential items. Assuming that applies to the stores that are already open.
Yes.
And food can include hot food from takeaways. I think most food outlets are now takeaway based only.
Yes.
So you just go up and you just queue, follow the guidelines, same sort of thing. You queue up outside, you take your order, they pass it out, and then you go on. I mentioned that some are obviously doing contact and drop. So you message them and then they'll deliver it to you. Okay, exercise. Likely to be reasonable. So we've got going for a run, a cycle, or practicing yoga. Walking in the countryside or in city, or attending an allotment. Driving to the countryside and walking. And this is the critical bit, is driving to the countryside and walking is basically where the walking activity or the exercise activity is longer than the drive itself to get to the place that you're going.
That's good news.
You can stop and rest and eat your lunch whilst on a long walk. So you can have rest breaks. And exercising more than once a day, the only relevant consideration is whether repeated exercise on the same day can be considered reasonable excuse for leaving the house. So I think it's if you have a training regime and you're following it, as opposed to just, I just fancy going out for another walk. As long as it's actually part of your structured exercise regime, then you can. If you're
an athlete or something.
Yeah. Not likely is driving for prolonged periods with only a brief exercise, and a short walk to a park bench when the person then remains seated for much longer periods. So basically all this is going, if it's down to the length of exercise that you're doing. So as long as you are exercising, you can remain out. If you have to stop for long periods of time, or you choose to stop for long periods of time, or just go for a short walk and sit on a bench, and then stay on the bench for a long time to read a newspaper or whatever, then that's not admissible. That's not reasonable. And you will be asked to be moved or fined. So the main thing is, if you're out and you're exercising and nothing else. Exercise. So the comments on these are: exercises come in many forms, including walks. Exercise must involve some movement, but it is acceptable for a person to stop for a break in the exercise. So if you're stopping for a water break or a couple of minute break just to get your breath back. However, very short periods of exercise to excuse a long period of inactivity may mean that the person is not engaged in exercise, but is in fact something else. So that's what we're saying again. and it is lawful to drive for exercise. So if you do go out into the countryside to walk or go to a gym, if there is a gym still open, so wherever you go, you can drive to that place for exercise. You got any thoughts? Anything you want to add to that?
Well, yes, that's different to what I understood. So this is good because it's clarifying points for me. I thought that you cannot drive to your place of exercise, that you have to go from your home back to your home, if that makes sense. And that driving was only to go to work or to collect essential items or to collect items on behalf of a vulnerable person. So that has clarified something for me, because there are places I'd like to visit, but it does mean a very short drive, and the drive would be much shorter than the amount of exercise carried out.
Yeah.
So that would be permissible. Great, that's great.
I think there was some confusion to start with. I think there was, because when they said the first long weekend or the first weekend that it all kicked off and everybody just headed off to the countryside.
Yeah.
So I think the main thing was they deterred people from driving distance to anywhere like national parks and national trust parks for exercise, because everyone just descended and it was just absolute chaos. So I think they had to bring in that level of restrictions to start with, until people actually knew what was going on and why we were doing it. And I think they've now just released that. So the main thing is you're not driving. I mean, round here, you're driving a couple of hours or so to get to any main National Trust properties or large country parks. There's not that many around here.
You've got Peckover House in Wisbeach.
Yeah.
And then you've got Elgood's Brewery that's got a nice garden.
But
and
I mean, yeah,
Hinchinbrook, haven't you?
Hinchinbrook Garden.
Close.
Yeah. But that's sort of a big open space. That's
yes.
Yeah, I mean there are pockets
that spring to mind.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's what springs to everybody's mind around here. They go, all right, let's all go to Hinchinbrook. So I think it's just a case of just being a bit more random in your thought. Bridle paths, country walks. Look at the map. As we're talking to Andrew last week about finding maps, getting the old Ordnance Survey maps out, and having a look at where the routes are. If you go on your local parish council, you'll quite often find guides to paths and highways and rights of ways in the vicinity of the town. So it will give a list, or it will give you a map of where you can walk, and again just adhering distancing and safety as well when you're out there, and not congregating where lots of other people are. But yeah, that's the main thing to take away, is that your drive to wherever it is has to be short, and shorter than the length of time that you are exercising. Okay, the next one is work. Likely to be reasonable. A key worker or other essential worker travelling to work where it is not reasonably possible to work from home. A non-key worker or non-essential key worker travelling to work where it is not reasonably possible to work from home. Or a person delivering food packages to vulnerable people. Not reasonable is a person who can work from home choosing to work in a local park, and a person knocking on doors offering to do cash in hand work.
Oh. Yes.
And
I suppose that's one good thing about lockdown. That kind of thing stops, because that can be quite intimidating to people when you get that knock on the door and it's somebody you don't know. And
yeah, it's difficult. there's always going to be people who are opportunists, and they will knock on doors and ask for work. But it's not just that; it's doing gardening as well.
Yes. Well, that is something that's not down on the rules, is it?
I think it was talked about in the first lot.
Yes.
Where it was saying don't do gardening, don't get someone in to do the gardening, because that you're inviting them onto your land, so there's a chance of contact, and also if you're doing gardening, then it could result to injury with using power tools and things. Well, so it was a bit sort of mixed as to what yes, you can and can't do when it comes to gardening.
You see, I can understand how that would be quite distressing to older people, because they really feel strongly, and I know I'm generalising again, but the ones that I'm in contact with feel strongly they want their gardens to look presentable.
Yeah.
And they are not well enough to do it themselves.
But I think
a gardener can go to the property without being in the property. That's still outside, which is interesting, isn't it?
It is, but then you've got to be prepared for then other people then shopping you for breaking the quarantine, breaking the lockdown, and that's the thing. You've got to balance between: is it acceptable? Is it socially acceptable? Or is it going to cause an issue with everybody else?
Mm.
And it's a fine line to go, because at the moment there are cases where people will shop you for the littlest things.
Mm.
So it's something that you do have to weigh. But then if you're having to, probably the balance is if you're not getting your hair done, then you shouldn't have your garden done.
No, I'm not getting my hair done, my ears done, my pedicure's done.
It's probably about the same. You could probably balance it the same sort of thing. You shouldn't be having someone coming around to do your hair at the same time. Then there should be someone coming around to do the garden.
Yes, that puts it all into perspective for me, David. Thank you.
So when you've got hedgerow growing out your head. What we've got the comments here are: there is no requirement to be a key worker or essential worker in order to travel to work. Anyone can travel to work if it is not reasonably possible to work from home. A request from an employer to attend the workplace should be sufficient. There is no requirement for the person to have any written proof of a need to go to work or volunteering. Police should not ask for ID documents of any other kind of or any other kind of documents. And there is no requirement for volunteers to work for a registered organisation or charity. There is no requirement for the volunteers to be related to COVID-19.
See, again, that's bothersome.
That's
to me,
changed, isn't it? Because they were checking IDs and stuff.
And that really does bother me, because if you're not volunteering for a recognised charity or constitutionalised group, or if it means you can be a member of a constitutionalised group, I take this back. But that's not clear to me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I want to see safeguarding policies, I want to see DBS checks, and I think they should be in place as a bare minimum.
Yeah,
there needs to be policies followed.
Yeah, I think that's something that the organisations have to look at if they're running workers who are helping the charities and organisations, that they've got to do some duty of care to make sure that they are co-opting people who are checked and they are following the guidelines, and that there's some way of displaying that they have been checked or something. But also, if you've got organisations that are helping people, then there needs to be some level of communication before that happens.
Yes.
So you're not getting just someone turning up at the door and saying, "I'm here to help," because that's going to upset people to start with. We're back to this, just not knocking on doors randomly and asking if people need help. I mean, that's not going to help. So if you're an organisation and you have a list of people that you need to help, then you should at least get in contact with them first and say, we're going to send someone around, and this is what they're going to do. They're going to drop off. They're going to keep social distancing, or whatever the organisation is. So at least everyone knows what everyone else is doing.
They also need to ask if the individual's happy with that.
Yes.
I think this has been a problem. People have thought, oh, you're a vulnerable person, you need me to help, but they don't always. And I was having a conversation with my husband last night, and he was saying, what we need is a national campaign to have posters, like the posters that say, I don't buy from travelling salesman type of thing. So please don't knock. We need a poster that says, I am a vulnerable person, or not even say that, because that's
that's something I would have issues with that as well.
But I am okay. I am okay, and I do not need assistance or something. I don't know. Actually, I take all of that back now, because that's a warning.
Yeah, that's
isn't it? Yeah,
it's something that was raised a couple of weeks ago, and it was something that I thought about. And yeah, my concern is, don't put anything on your door that says that you are vulnerable, or raising the awareness of someone else who could take advantage of you.
Yeah,
and that's something to be aware of. So make sure you don't have signs on there saying that you are vulnerable, or don't come in because you're someone who is being told to isolate for 12 weeks because of medical conditions. You've got to be careful, and you've got to be sensible. So if you have organisations or people who you use on a regular basis already, that you already know and trust, then talk to them and arrange whatever care and help that is being provided. And make sure that, like you say, you ask for it, that you're actually talking to them and saying, right, okay, I know you're coming, this is what I need. And then you discuss what it is that your arrangements are, so everybody's happy. It's that pushing your way in and forcing your way in and trying to take advantage of people. That's where it's that's what we're trying to stop.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think if you are an organisation, then you should have documentation and lanyards and stuff anyway. The police shouldn't have to ask you for documentation, as long as you can just justify and say, look, I am working for this and I'm going here, or I'm going to exercise, or you've got a valid reason for whatever you're doing. Then there's no reason for any sort of serious investigations unless you start behaving oddly.
It is interesting as well in regards to DBS checks, because the DBS have changed the rules since we've gone into lockdown around identification checking. Yes, okay. So that's really good. We can now use forums like we're using. The original items need to be seen at some point, but you can show them using this kind of forum, a Hangout or Zoom or whatever it is that your preferred choice to contact via the internet.
Yeah, I mean, actually, just taking a step aside here, that's something that's is of interest as well. The actual communication, actually safety of using online video, and that's something that's been highlighted. If you're running a group or an organisation, especially if you're involving children and people who are vulnerable.
Yes.
There are certain applications that are more secure than others. And that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. So things like Skype and Hangout are more secure because they are point to point, and you've got to be registered. And but if you have something like Zoom, there's been a lot of press about Zoom because it's had a lot of security issues where it's been hijacked and hacked by other people, other agencies, where they've gone in and bombed meetings.
Really?
Yeah. And obviously upset the people that are hosting the actual event itself. So there's levels of security that are at question. And I know that they are trying to implement it and make sure it falls under the guideline, but a lot of countries have deliberately stopped using it. And a lot of backers are raising a lot of questions as to what's happening and why there are so many issues. But yes, that is something that you do need to be aware of, and do your research onto which platforms that are using media to communicate or to share video and conferencing. So if you're looking at business, if you're doing business to business conferencing, you have to go for something that is more secure.
Yes.
You can't just, because even Downing Street stopped using Zoom because of security issues. So, or certainly not for high level security. I think they still use it for less secure stuff. But you've got to take that into consideration for what it is you're doing. Because the last thing you want is to be compromised, or a GDPR, a breach of your privacy policy that your business runs, because someone has then sat in and watched your business meeting and has taken that information. So that's something to bear in mind, that you are using the right level of security for your businesses, or for the security of the people that are using the applications.
Well, that's really important to know. If you're checking somebody's ID, you don't want to use a format that can be corrupted in some way, do you?
Exactly. Yeah, we have to look at security at all levels, and just because it's an application that's available, you've got to also look at the security behind it to keep yourself and the people that you're working with safe as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have other reasons. Okay, these are other aspects. What is reasonable is taking an animal for treatment.
Oh, yes.
Moving to a friend's address for several days to allow a cooling off following arguments at home.
Good.
And providing support to vulnerable people. So I think that's the element of the moving to another address for several days is the emphasis on is long term.
Yes.
That it's not just a popping over, seeing, come back, popping over, seeing them, come back. So they're not just quick trips. It's a case of, everyone has, a lot of people have arguments and disagreements, and if everyone's in the house, it can get fraught and it can be difficult, and life goes on. So there's got to be a way of just having some calm time or chill out time, or some way where you can get away. So yes, if you have the opportunity to go and stay at another address for a period of time, then it is something that has to be taken into consideration. But like you say, it's got to be for a long duration of time and not just popping back and forth.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I don't think people realise that. So this is good. If you've had a massive argument, you might not want to stay at home.
Well, this falls on for the abuse that we were talking about as well. You don't have to stay. If there's an abusive relationship and you've got that opportunity to get away, then I suppose that this sort of I mean, there's so many issues regarding to that anyway. So you're better off looking at the help sites specifically aimed at that. But at least you know that there are, they're not saying that you can't go and stay somewhere else for a period of time. Yeah. So and also providing support for vulnerable people. So if you're a carer and you have to do regular deliveries for groceries and stuff, or just general looking after, because the people that you're looking at can't move around.
Yes.
If they have mobility restrictions and they need to have someone come in to do basic healthcare, and that's something that was already in place beforehand, then that should carry on.
Yes.
As long as you are, I don't know, wearing face masks or some kind of protection, or a basic level of protection. But if it's an organised thing, then you should have preset guidelines anyway. Or if you don't know, then probably the best thing is to speak to NHS and find out what you should and shouldn't have if you are dealing with a friend who may or may not have coronavirus, or if you have. You may suspect that there is coronavirus in the area, then obviously you'd have to follow protocol as well.
Yes.
So don't just turn up and just help with no thought about your safety and the person that you're looking after's safety as well. Not reasonable is visiting a vet surgery in person to renew a prescription.
Oh, right. Okay.
Things like this that can be done over the phone. So if you can do it over the phone, then do it over the phone. And visiting a friend in their address, or meeting in public to socialise. So basically, no socialising. Again, something that can be done over a phone or a Skype or any kind of video or telephone conferencing. Have all your mates hang out. I mean, kids have been doing this on Xbox Live and PlayStation, whatever the equivalent is. They've been doing that for years.
They have, haven't they?
So why do they suddenly have to stop now and go and meet up? It's because they're told they can't do it.
Yeah. Oh,
if they
you
say,
see them all on their bikes, don't you?
Yeah.
They're keeping 2 metres apart, though. When they're cycling, they are, generally.
As long as they're not right behind each other.
They're kind of to abreast. That's the problem on the country road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take up the whole road.
So what we've got? But yes, vets. Make sure that if you do have poorly pets, then they are treated. Mm-hmm. They have priority as well. So don't, because we talked about this before about the rise in people abandoning pets and taking them to homes, and so don't do it. There's no need. You can still look after you've got pet shops. What's the one in Ravenswood in Wisbeach, and
yes,
the Pets Pantry in Chatteris, and I'm sure there's other pet shops in between that we don't know yet, but
actually,
they will do.
There's an update.
Okay.
There's an update on Ravenswood. Ravenswood Pet Rescue Centre. They set up a new Facebook page group called Fenland Pet Food Support Page, and they've got a GoFundMe page as well.
Okay.
So they will help people who are finding it difficult to feed their pets as well. So don't struggle. There's no need to. Contact them. They will help.
Okay. So there's no excuse at all for getting rid of your pets because you think it's being difficult. There is always a way around. There is always someone that can help, and there is always advice. I mean, if necessary, phone the vet and just say, look, I'm having difficulty, and I'm sure they can give you contact details or places where you can get hold of stuff. But the pet shops are doing delivery services.
Yes.
So don't worry. As long as you can still afford to look after the pets and pay for the food and stuff, then you just speak to them and they'll deliver the stuff to you. You don't have to make the trips to go and get it.
But Ravenswood will help if you can't afford to.
Yeah.
I think this is the thing, and we are hitting an economic downturn, aren't we?
Yeah.
So that if you're desperate, don't give the pets up.
No.
Keep them.
That's good.
It's a horrible thought, isn't it?
Yeah. So vets will remain open. So taking animals for treatment would qualify as a good reason, as it's the owner of the pets has a duty to preserve welfare. So you are looking after the welfare of your animals. So you are responsible for making sure that you have duty of care for the animal. So so if the animal's suffering or needs medical attention, then that has to be seen. But yeah, you can't just go and visit a vet surgery or anywhere that could be done just to pop in. Is not reasonable. Anything that you could do with a phone call is advisable. The regulations allow people to move house. This means that individuals can move between households. Yeah, and it says this should be a genuine move, i.e. measured in days, not hours. So whatever, if you're moving from one house to another house, then it has to be for a duration and not just visiting.
Right. I see.
Social visits are not generally a good reason for leaving your home. And that's that.
That's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot, which is why I thought that we'd make the effort of just going through and look at it specifically, because there's so much that's going on.
Yeah.
And just trying to, and even then, you read through there, and there's still some elements of confusion, and it is so difficult, and it is down to your interpretation. But the main thing is, if you don't need to go out, don't go out.
Yes.
If you can work from home, then work from home. If you have no other choice and you have a job where you have to go to the office to work, then you have no other option. You have to do that, as long as it's your company is not being furloughed. You've got cases where companies have been furloughed and they've still been asking staff to work, which is a no-no. We've talked about this before, and this has come from the Secretary of State. If you are furloughed, you do not work. It is a legal requirement that you do not carry on working. All sorts of things. There's insurance. There's insurance companies won't pay you, and if you found out, or someone will shop you as well, because you've got the e-cops for shopping businesses that are carrying working when they've been told not to. Yes. So there's lots of things. So yeah, only go out to work if you have to, and you can drive to work or you can drive to exercise. But if you are exercising, make sure that your exercise is longer than the actual travel to and from it, or walk.
Yes.
If you can walk to and from the place, then better. So yeah, that's a lot. I mean, if you've got any questions yourself, give us a shout. We can, if we can't answer them, we can certainly find or pass them on to other people who can.
Yes, get an expert.
Exactly. And we like experts. So if you're an expert, get in touch. We're not doing an interview today, but we are trying to line up someone who's going to have an interview next week. It's someone who actually deals with bereavement and well-being and counselling.
Oh,
I thought
good.
that was going to be quite useful. Maybe not necessarily now, but certainly in weeks and months ahead, where there's going to be a lot of broken people. It's sad to say, but there's going to be a lot of people who are going to have a lot of post-traumatic or certainly a lot of delayed grief and stress and anxiety and all stuff. That's all going to sort of appear over time. So it would be interesting to have someone who is a counsellor to give their take on stuff. So we've got some questions already lined up, but if you've got any specific questions, let us know and we'll add them to the list. Okay, we'll do the sad news of the daily stats. 2 million almost 200,000 cases reported worldwide. Number of cases tested positively tested in the UK, I should say that, is 103,093, and the number of deaths as of this morning was 13,729. So that's still been updated. That's still not taking into account things like care homes and deaths in other locations outside hospitals. But those figures are being adjusted. What is interesting that China have updated their figures as well. They've added new deaths from Wuhan, where it all started. They've basically doubled the number of deaths that was originally recorded,
which is really worrying, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can understand in a lot of countries. I mean, it's not going to be any particular country, but it's going to take a long time for complete statistics of everywhere to come through. That's up to date, because there is always a delay somewhere, and not every country has recorded deaths in care homes.
No,
and that even in Europe, there's a few countries that haven't. So the numbers can be a bit misleading.
They're just, regardless, they're very high.
Yeah.
And they're very upsetting, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, it's nearly 14,000 people, and it's 14,000 people that shouldn't have died.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all very sad. Life with lockdown. Some good news. Captain Tom Moore.
Look, Tom Moore.
He is an amazing person. There's talk about him being knighted now.
Yes.
But he finished. I hadn't realised he was still going, but as of yesterday, he finished his 100 laps, because he wanted to get it done before his birthday, which is in a few days' time. It is this month.
Yes, his birthday is the 30th of April.
It's the 30th, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And now there's lots of campaigns to try and raise some money for him now. But he has raised, as of just before the show, it stood at 18,283,423.
Wow.
And he said he will keep going if people still want to contribute for the NHS. He will carry on.
That's just amazing.
It is. It's just gone up. I mean, it was 12 million yesterday. It's just so much, because it's all going to a worthy cause.
It's going to a worthy cause, and everybody loves him.
Yes.
They love him. They love Captain Tom.
They do. I mean, even Matt Hancock this morning was talking about him and saying, he's just doing an absolute fantastic job. And the money that he's raised is just phenomenal and will be very much appreciated by the organisations and the NHS itself.
Yeah.
But I've noticed there's a few, when I was looking, there's a few pages being set up for people to raise money for Captain Tom himself, to thank him for the work that he's done. Nice. So, but careful. Make sure
I think he'd want to. Yes.
Make sure that you are finding the right charitable donation site, because in times like this, there's always people who set up fake ones. Well, not set up fake ones, but they just set them up with no intention of actually passing on the money. So just do your research.
I understand.
There are, like anything, be sensible. Be careful, do your research, make sure you find a legitimate one, and not Mr. Blobby from down the road who's doing it just for nefarious reasons. So do your homework and make sure you're doing the right one if you are looking to support.
I don't understand entirely, David, why somebody would feel there's a need to fund Captain Tom himself, because he seems quite comfortable, doesn't he, and has everything that he needs.
Yeah.
So That is a bit confusing, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you do a Facebook fundraiser as well, the money goes directly to the person setting the fund up, doesn't it? And it's the onus is on that
on them
person
to actually
to then pass it on.
Yeah. So, yeah, it raised an eyebrow when I started going, because I was looking for Tom Moore's site, and I was looking under GoFundMe. And then I realised that it wasn't. He was on Just Giving. So if you're looking for his page to sponsor him, then it's Just Giving and Captain Tom Moore, and you'll find it there. All the other ones are not official.
Ooh.
So,
Right.
just make sure you do your homework and you're not giving money out unnecessarily. You want to make sure that if you are giving money, it's going to the right place. And if you're being naughty, take this as a slap on the hand. Don't do it.
No, don't
You will
do
get
it.
fined. You will get found now. You know, these things do get reported, and you end up in the paper. You know, it has happened several times where people have used other people misfortune to raise money for themselves. So it's sad, but people always try and find loopholes, but they get caught in the end. Business grants. Fenland District Council have they're obviously going through those who are eligible for grants, and they have been in touch with all those who are rateable businesses. And they have contacted them. There are some that haven't been contacted yet, and if you go to the Fenland District Council webpage, there is a list of instructions there, and there are forms there. So if you know that you are eligible and that you do pay rates, and you've got a rateable number, and you haven't been contacted by the council, then find the paperwork, fill it in and send it to them. And we'll finish off with some good news, I think, unless you've got anything else you want to add before I do the last bit.
Yes, I've got two lots of good news that comes on the back of the local recycling bins. They're getting full to capacity because they're not being emptied at the moment during lockdown.
Yeah.
These are the clothing ones.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yes, so please don't take clothes and leave them by the side, because that creates a hazard of the recycling bins.
Yeah.
Don't leave them by the side of the recycling bins. Keep them at home until the lockdown comes out, or we come out of lockdown.
Because that can lead to things like infestations and rats and things like that, can't it?
Yes, it's causing a worry. But Neil Wade Academy's DT faculty students, they made PPE, which has been approved, and it's being worn now by the staff at West Norfolk Hospital.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So that's great, yes. And yesterday, students and key workers made a huge rainbow banner that said "Thank you NHS" and blazoned across the top of it. There's a Doddington man called Callum Butler, and he created a fundraiser on the 4th of April to make 3D printed visors for the NHS for workers across Fenland. And he's raised over £2,300, and his target was 850, so he's done well there. Finally, Mainey Community Primary School have been working with Cavalry School in March. Cavalry School in March are making meals that the staff of Mainey Community Primary School are taking out on a Meals on Wheels basis to vulnerable students that usually rely on school lunches.
Yeah.
So that's really good. Some nice, good stories, good news stories.
Well, this is what I was saying in the last episode, that there are so many little stories like these that are out there.
There are, aren't there?
And they are quite heartening to read. And I also what I heard, there was a teenager. He developed, it was a device that went round the back so that nurses, when their face masks, it would attach to that as opposed to round the ears.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And I think he's about 14 or 15, and or 16 years old, and he's basically got a 3D printer in his bedroom, and he's just churning out hundreds of these things for the NHS.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, so it's fantastic what people can do, and that's something that they've been talking about yesterday. Was it Burberry and some of the other clothing manufacturers are now, and the hospitals are now talking directly to these companies, these fashion companies, for gowns and various other PPE equipment as well, because they're running low on they're using their PPE faster than they're expecting, and there is such a massive shortage of, they just can't manufacture enough of it.
It sounds like they feel like they've been let down, doesn't it? It sounds like they're trying to save lives and protect their own lives and the lives of their families as well, and that creates stress, doesn't it?
Yeah, It is difficult, and it is good to see that people are putting themselves out to make sure that stuff is getting done, but it also has to be fit for purpose as well.
Yes.
And that's the problem, is that various companies have put forward ideas for various devices and things, and they've not been picked up because they don't quite adhere to all the regulations, which is difficult, but at least then they've got an option of a variety to choose from.
Yes.
Was it yesterday there was a guy who's done a mobile ventilator system in a box.
Right. I didn't know about this one.
It's not been authorised in the UK, but it has been in South Africa.
Oh, right.
So he's making it. It's a completely... it's an aircraft company, aero engine engineer, and they've built this box based... It's like a suitcase size, and it's all contained within there. And it's been ratified by organisations abroad, as for mainly for third world countries.
Oh, brilliant.
So that's now been put into development. I think they're going to build it in another country and then assembled in Africa.
That's amazing.
So it just shows how much resource and initiative and bureaucracy get in the ways of things.
Yeah.
You know, this idea of actually this heretical thing of having an engineer and a designer working together to actually create something in a very short space of time and then getting approved, you know, as opposed to the months and years that normally things take to become useful or to be approved.
Red tape's a bad thing.
It is.
Mm.
I mean, it has its place, but it does hinder an awful lot of project, and it also makes the project so much more expensive.
Yes.
You know, if you can reduce
true.
that time between the initial idea and getting it into practice, getting it into use, you save so much money.
Mm.
Because it's just that delays, and then if it's delayed too long, then it becomes out of date, and then it needs to be updated, and then it's not fit for purpose, and it just goes in. It's an endless cycle. A lot of people know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, if you can get it designed, done, and implemented within such a short space of time, and it complies with the design requirements, then yeah, it's got to be beneficial for everybody.
Yes.
Including the taxpayer.
Most definitely.
So,
yes.
All good things. Yes. So, is there anything else that's?
I'm just checking. I have got something from Doris.
Okay.
Actually.
Oh, we haven't thought about Doris. What's Doris got to say?
Oh, Doris is cross that people aren't staying home. She's saying, just stay home,
yes.
Please. She's saying, do as Boris asks, stay home. She's also asking children and young people. She likes her drawings, Doris, doesn't she?
She does, yes.
She's asking if children and young people could take the drawings that they've done for their windows and do similar, and could they pass them to care homes to brighten up the care homes for residents.
Oh, that'd be good.
I thought that was nice as well.
Yeah.
She's saying rainbows and bears in particular would be nice for the residents to receive.
Yeah, that would be really good. And it saves having them being thrown away or, or hidden away on the fridge.
Yes.
So, yeah, go to places where they would be appreciated. So
dear. I've got some drawings that are years old that my niece and nephew used to do.
You could sell them on eBay.
I can't take them down. I love them.
You could sell them on eBay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, we've got one last story, and this is a big one, and it's going to please a lot of people, a lot of mums, I believe.
Oh right.
And possibly some dads as well. Can't distinguish, differentiate. But about 3 or 4 years ago, the actor Tom Hardy did a guest bedtime read on Cbeebies. I think it was a Valentine's night. I've got a suspicion. I vaguely remember. I think it was the 14th of February. But for 1 week only, Tom Hardy is going to be reading bedtime stories every night. At 6:50 from the 27th of April, he will be reading a selection of bedtime stories. So make sure you have all your kids ready.
And adults.
And adults. For some reason, I think the Cbeebies is going to have probably the highest TV ratings ever.
That's brilliant.
And it's gone international as well. It's CNN have picked up the story as well. So I think BBC America are going to be tuning in as well. So a big, if you can.
I love that.
Yeah, I think. I know a few people who are big fans of Tom Hardy. So.
Oh yes, I can't think why.
I can't see it myself. So I think that's it for today's show. It's been a bit of a long show today. I think this is going to be our longest one.
Is it?
Yeah. So,
wow.
But we've had a lot to talk about, a lot of issues to get through, and hopefully some of those things will help. And if you have to discuss, or if you have any questions or queries about what we have, send them to us, ask us, and if we don't know, we will pass them on to the relevant bodies that will give you an answer, and we'll get an answer to you.
Yes.
So that's all from me. Have you got anything to finish with?
No. I've gone through everything.
Excellent. Well, we'll wrap everything up. So keep safe, stay indoors, wash your hands, keep safe. All the usual good stuff. Follow the guidelines, self-isolate, look after yourself, and join us for the next episode. Which, better to say, actually, next week,
Yes.
we're changing the format slightly. Well, not changing the format, we're changing the days of delivery. We are finding that 3 days a week is just a tad too much.
Yes.
I am now getting a little bit of work through. Which is good news, but I've also got to find the time to do that work.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I have to make some allowances, and three shows a week is just too much to then do anything else. So unfortunate, but that's just the way things are. This is all done voluntary. We do this in our spare time, but spare time is at a premium. So as of next week, we'll just be doing Mondays and Thursdays.
Yes.
So we've got a bit of a break between each show, and that helps. Just means that we don't run out of material.
No, but there's always seemed to be enough material, hasn't there?
There has.
To deliver.
Sometimes there's been more than enough. So it certainly shows that. Not rambling on a bit at the end, but yeah, it does show that there is a lot of news and material that comes from here, from this area, that just doesn't get out and needs to be heard by the public.
Yes, absolutely.
because I'm learning stuff every time. You're bringing stuff in that I've not heard either. So it's out there, and people need to hear it.
Yes, they do.
Okay, that's it. That's the end of the show. It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Bye.